What's up guys, I'm J-Man and welcome to another installment of Which is Better. Today we're going to be looking at two of Disney's recent live-action remakes, Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella. Now I'm comparing these two because even though they are two completely different movies, they actually have a lot of similarities. They're both about a young girl who is very book smart, lives with her father and has a deceased mother, meets another character who is secretly a prince, they have a nice dance together, they both have an enchantress character of a sort, and also they're two of the more popular Disney remakes to come out as of late. Now keep in mind, I would never declare any of this as fact, it's all strictly my opinion, so without further ado, let's decide. So let's start with the small stuff first and talk about how each of these movies look. Beauty and the Beast, I would say, has a very standard color palette that is usually very present in a lot of Disney remakes. Everything just looks bland and depressing, and by the end it's a lot more colorful, but nothing really stands out too much. Maybe you could say that it's meant to be a darker story, but remember, even in the original, the first half is pretty dark and then the atmosphere changes to be even brighter because the Beast himself starts changing and their relationship starts to grow. The atmosphere matches the story. In the remake, there are moments when some color stands out, but it's still kind of overshadowed by its bleak atmosphere, and even by the end, when it's a happy ending and the color returns to normal, if anything, it just looks like the sun came up and nothing really changes. In Cinderella, however, the colors are a lot more vibrant. They stand out a lot more. More than that, they actually serve a purpose to the story. Lady Tremaine is usually seen wearing dark green, which is the color of greed and envy, whereas Ella is always seen wearing light blue, which is the color of knowledge and kindness. And it's ironic because in both of the originals, it was quite the other way around. Beauty and the Beast was a lot more colorful and Cinderella was more bland. What's more, the heavier emotional moments have darker lighting, and the bright happy moments have more light to them, thus making the atmosphere match the story. As with framing and camera work, both are kind of bland in their own way, but with Beauty and the Beast, since it's also a musical, it's still shot so unenergetically. It just feels so standard and lazy. Even the lighting makes it hard to see sometimes. In Cinderella, when her and the prince dance together, it's this entire sequence and the camera almost sways with them, so it's at least a little more creative. So all points go to Cinderella in this one. So Beauty and the Beast tried really hard to respect the original film. The problem is that's also its biggest downfall. It tries too hard to the point where it's practically a carbon copy of the original film. Yes, they do put more content into it, even doing stuff to respect the book too, but it's not very memorable and most of the time just comes off as useless padding. Take this scene for instance. The Beast has to let Belle go so she can take care of her father. Just that look alone on his face was enough for us to think that he's heartbroken and it hurts to see her go. But instead, the movie prolongs the scene with, "Now I know she'll never leave me, even as she fades from view." Don't get me wrong, it's a good song, but it's not very memorable, and more importantly, it's not needed. I would even go so far as to say that the remake actually insults the original in some ways. The one thing I can think of is the enchanted objects kind of hog the spotlight a lot. In the original, they never tell Belle about the curse. There is technically that whole extended song, Human Again, which is about how the objects can't wait to go back to normal, but it's done in such a way where it doesn't take away from the actual love story. In fact, if anything, it feeds off of the love story. In the remake, they actually do tell her about it. Not how she can break it, but just that he and the rest of the enchanted objects have been cursed and that it's all their fault because they didn't do anything when his father was cruel to him. Don't get me wrong, something like that could work, but the way it's presented, it comes off as more of a sob story than anything. And then when the Beast dies, we cut right away to the objects turning inanimate, which kind of takes away from the whole tragedy of the moment and makes it more about the objects themselves. In Cinderella, they pretty much just took the basics of the original movie and did their own thing with it, which I can actually appreciate a lot more. It doesn't try to remind you how great the original was, that's what we have the original for. It actually tries to be its own movie. Ella and the prince meeting before the ball, therefore building a foundation for their relationship. The prince having an ailing father and struggling with learning to be a king, thus making the prince more of a character rather than a prize for Cinderella by the end. Giving Lady Tremaine a backstory that shows how just like Ella she once was, thus making her the embodiment of Ella's possible fate. See, little things like that are what make the remake more special and stand out more as its own piece. Whereas with Beauty and the Beast, it's so much like the original that it just makes you want to watch the original instead. They do put some effort into it being different, like creating more songs for instance, and even though they are sweet in nature, again, they're not too memorable. In fact, if anything, they just made me want to listen to the original Broadway soundtrack. And that's one other thing about Cinderella that I actually appreciated more. It wasn't a musical. It just has one little song that is sung without music and only serves as a piece that Ella would sing to make herself feel better. It wasn't in the original, and yet it stands out as its own thing. Beauty and the Beast tries with moments like that, and some are good, others not so much. So, gotta go with Cinderella once again. It respects the original while also having the balls to be original. So technically, I would say that Belle should be more favored than Ella, mostly because she's more proactive and doesn't let anyone walk all over her. Not even a hideous beast who orders her around and doesn't treat her right. Unfortunately, this is all brought down by Emma Watson's performance. Everything, from her voice to her posturing, even the expressions on her face seem so fake. Take this scene for instance. In the original, this is meant to be Belle's whole Julie Andrews moment. Notice how expressive and energetic she is, from her face to her body language to especially her voice. It's all there. In the remake...
I want adventure in the great white somewhere. I want it more than I can tell.
It comes off like a middle school student doing a play. She just stands there. Her voice is so flat, it just seems like she's going through the motions more than anything. In Cinderella, Lily James's performance is spot on. Despite popular belief, she's not always so smiley all the time. She's also concerned, she's sad, she's devastated, she's assertive. She actually acts in this movie. Ain't that a concept? More than that, a general rule in filmmaking, especially in screenwriting, is be mean to your characters. And I would actually say that Ella actually has more to deal with in her movie. Losing both her mom and her dad, her mother's dress being torn apart, put to work as a lowly servant girl, kept from being with the man she loves, even being imprisoned in her own home. Belle technically does have some trials that she goes through as well, but it never seems like they affect her as deeply. Someone destroys something she invented, she barely even looks annoyed at it. She's imprisoned and the beast drags her father away, she barely even sheds a tear. She gets attacked by wolves, she doesn't even look frightened for her life. There are scenes, however, where she does do a decent job, like the scene where she learns about the death of her mother, or when the beast dies in her arms. The problem is, they are cut way too short before we're actually able to feel the emotional weight it should have. It just seemed like all the emotional stuff was more bullet points than actual story beats. With Cinderella, it lingered on further so we were able to feel what the characters were going through. When she learns of her father's passing, she holds the branch tightly and the camera backs away from her, showing the sad and lonely state she now feels. In Beauty and the Beast, when Belle learns how her mother died, she weeps for a second, but then she just decides to go home. Ironically, the 2-hour-long movie seemed a lot more rushed than its hour-and-a-half-long animated version. So another point goes to Cinderella on this one. Lily James just did a better performance and her characters seem to go through the most growth. So Beauty and the Beast has always had the same main theme ever since it was first told in 1740. That true beauty is on the inside. And like I said, the remake doesn't accomplish this because Belle and the Beast have very little screen time together and it's more about the enchanted objects' plight. Admittedly though, they actually changed the theme in the remake of Cinderella. In the original, the theme was basically have faith in your dreams and don't give up hope. But in the remake, it's have courage and be kind, and don't let your circumstances change you. But what I love even more about the remake of Cinderella is that it addressed something about the Cinderella story that is never really talked about. The story of Cinderella is not just about a girl who works as a lowly servant to a cruel family, has a fairy godmother who gives her a dress and carriage, dances with the man of her dreams, loses a slipper, it's put back on, and she lives happily ever after. See, if anything, that's just the most iconic stuff about it. The story of Cinderella is actually about abuse. Cinderella's kindness in the remake is both her strength and her weakness. It makes her better than most around her, but is also the one tactic that people have to use her for personal gain. And since people still wonder to this day why she never leaves her household, well, it's because it's the only place she's ever known as home and she would have nowhere else to go. Also, it's all she has left of her parents and she's still trying hard to be their little girl. The reason why she finally leaves at the end is because she finally has a place to call her own. In the end, all it is about is a girl growing up into her own woman and overcoming that which she feels is bringing her down. And that's why I love Cinderella more than Beauty and the Beast. It got to the heart of the story rather than just showing us the most iconic bits. Whereas Beauty and the Beast didn't know what it was trying to be and was also trying to please lovers of the original movie and even the book too. So Cinderella is the winner of this round. So overall, Cinderella is definitely the better remake in my opinion. Now, does this mean that I hate the remake of Beauty and the Beast? No, I just don't think it's very good. It definitely had some great moments, like Be Our Guest was still done very well, and believe it or not, I'm actually one of the few people that actually enjoy the whole magic book scene. So in that regard, I can give it credit where due, I guess. But as CellSpecs once put, it's beautifully pointless. So which do you think is better? Whatever it is, don't be shy, leave a reply. Also be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and please support me on Patreon if you'd be so kind. And if you like this video, you can like, comment, and subscribe to the J-Man. Keep looking deep.